donc serait principalement présentée en français, mais que certaines des interventions, peut-être même la moitié d'ailleurs, seront faites en anglais. Et les temps de questions et d'échanges aussi, s'il y en a, peuvent être effectués en anglais. Peut-être une brève présentation des orateurs, au moins, enfin de ceux qui interviennent, au moins dans cette première partie, jusqu'à midi. Dans quelques minutes, donc, nous aurons l'occasion d'écouter Doru Costache, que je salue, je le vois présent parmi nous. Puis après, ce qu'il nous donnera, donc on aura l'occasion de représenter ça, Maria Constantiniu, qui est là aussi présente avec nous, je la salue, bonjour. Et puis, aux alentours de 11h, 11h10, Sam Kennelly, qui est, je n'ai pas vérifié encore s'il était présent sur la liste, s'il était arrivé.
Oui, il est là.
Il est là. Donc, s'il m'entend, je le salue également. Nous l'entendrons un peu plus tard, donc, dans la matinée. Et avant midi, nous aurons la joie d'entendre donc Paul-Claude Diop et Catherine Brockschmetzer jusqu'à donc l'heure du déjeuner. Sans plus tarder, je vais laisser la parole à Doru Costache. Je peux peut-être le plus simple est que vous vous présentiez brièvement, dire, ce sera. I think you will speak in English, right?
Yes.
Yes, and you're able to understand the French is not a problem, or you want some explanation, or it's okay.
So far, so good.
So maybe you can introduce yourself briefly, just to say what is your place and your occupation right now, and let us just present your project. I think it's a book, right? Not you will explain it. No problem. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Je vous remercie pour cette invitation. Absolument ravi. I understand French, but I lost the habit of speaking it. So, yeah. I'll go.
Your French seems to be perfect.
Go English. So my name is Doru Costache. I'm an Orthodox priest and an associate professor in theology at St. Cyril's Coptic Orthodox Theological College with the Sydney College of Divinity, Sydney, Australia. And I am mainly interested in the interdisciplinary approach to various early Christian theologians, including John Chrysostom. And this is part of, it's not a book. This one isn't a book. But I'm interested in retrieving Chrysostom as a theologian that can be used or redeployed today for the conversations that we usually call science and religion. This is a topic that is not so much addressed in scholarship, to my knowledge, and I'm just doing whatever the first steps myself in the field. I'll share my slides. So, Chrysostom's apophatic approach to God's nature, providential activity, and creation. These are the highlights, the outlines of my presentation. There's a context to my research, as I have already pointed out. Then why Chrysostom? Why bringing him in this conversation? And I believe that he has a lot to say about apophaticism, the apophatic method as a humble approach to things that is very useful to theologians, but also in the conversation between theologians and scientists today. And then I'll be looking at 2-3 passages from on the incomprehensible nature of God and homilies on Genesis, and then I'll draw some conclusions. So what's the context? What am I doing? I'm very much interested in drawing the field of science and theology, or science and religion, back to its historical roots, Christian historical roots, and therefore I'm interested in exploring various early Christian theologians from this viewpoint. More recently, I have become interested in the new concept of science-engaged theology, which is, from my viewpoint, a better way of dealing with science and religion, or matters pertaining to science and religion, at least from a theologically trained person's point of view. Why is this so interesting? It's because it doesn't require...
Recording in progress.
Okay. It doesn't require...
Sorry.
Yep, no worries. It doesn't require to think again in terms of either or. What do we choose? It is a supernaturalist view of things. It's the naturalist view of things. Do we choose God? Do we choose nature? And so on and so forth. And I think science-engaged theology keeps us on safer grounds, away from this kind of binary thinking, which is so undermining for whatever we try to build today, a world of harmony, peace, and mutual understanding, rather the opposite. What are the specifics of science-engaged theology? At least from my viewpoint, it doesn't seek an agreement between theology and science, which is something that we actually see in Chrysostom and in other early Christian thinkers. It takes in consideration scientific ideas. In other words, instead of building a theological worldview that completely ignores, let's say, the natural sciences, it builds on the knowledge acquired via scientific research, which is, by the way, something that many 4th century theologians, including Chrysostom to an extent, actually appreciated and cultivated as a method. And then science-engaged theology uses scientific knowledge as a common ground for the conversation between scientists and theologians. And I believe that one of the greatest lessons that we can use in this field of science-engaged theology is the humble approach, the apophatic approach, that requires from us to take a step back from, let's call it, emotions, and make room for a variety of viewpoints. And as such, it entails humility on both sides, in this case, scientists and theologians. And I believe that Chrysostom is a great master that can teach us a lot from this viewpoint. And I go to Chrysostom. So why talking about him in this context of science and religion, or science and theology, or again, better, science-engaged theology? Well, we know that he isn't credited as being a grand master of apophatic theology or mystical theology. I have many colleagues, theologians, who actually belittle him as a theologian. But I believe that he's severely underestimated, and the depth of his thinking and the complexity of his theological approach to thing is really misunderstood. Thankfully, there are various other areas, and many of you deal with these other areas, that bring to the fore the complexity and the refinement of Chrysostom's method. But I think we should still do something about, at least me as a theologically trained person, to do something to bring to the fore the many details and nuances and sides of this very complex theologian. And as a theologian, I think largely because of his rhetorical training, which did not go for nonsense speculative thinking, he cultivated common sense, and this common sense led him to what we call today apophaticism, that attitude of reverence to reality, where instead of trying to exhaust reality by way of definitions and descriptions, we rather draw contours, if you like. And I believe that this is one of the greatest points that Chrysostom makes throughout his very impressive corpus of writings. And this is a passage that I have from a scholar of the older generation, Margaret Shatkin, who in this beautiful book, John Chrysostom as Apologist, I don't know how much this book is trendy these days, but I discovered it only recently, published in 1987, says something about him. Chrysostom did not get involved in theological controversy, and we know that, and was opposed to speculative theology. The mystical outlook of John Chrysostom was probably developed in reaction to the extreme rationalism of the Anomians, or Eunomians, if you like, who denied the mystery of the Christian religion. So he reacted, so he adopted his apophatic approach in reaction to an arrogant claim on the part of certain theologians that they can exhaust the mystery of God. And I think that this is something applicable to theologians that engage nature, for example, or try to draw the map of reality, but also to scientists. And this is a topic of great interest for many branches from theology to whatever the natural sciences, I believe. And I have scientist friends who actually have learned to appreciate more and more the importance of this humble approach, this apophatic approach. Of course, we don't have time to go through these passages that I have prepared here. Of course, time flies. But this is, if you like, the pretext of his apophatic discourse on the incomprehensible nature of God. He has a go at Eunomius and his school, who claimed that they know God as God himself knows himself. And he replies that, well, even the angels don't know God. How can we claim to be knowing God? We know the creating power of God, but we don't know anything as created beings. We don't know anything about God in his essence, or God's essence. So God's nature should be treated apophatically, and because we don't know anything about God's nature, God's essence, we should simply abstain from fighting each other on account of God. At least that's my take. And then he goes on talking about providence. This is a beautiful passage on the incomprehensible nature of God. The first chapter, whatever, sections 31, 33. And this is something that would deserve a lot of attention on our part, which is something that I work on. But he actually deals with a passage in Paul's first letter, Corinthians 13:9, our knowledge is imperfect, where he proves against his Eunomian contenders that Paul speaks of our incapacity to know. And if we don't know God's providence, how can we know God's essence? Why is this important? It's because God's providence is God's way of doing stuff in the world. In other words, we don't know God's essence. We don't know how God operates in the universe. These are very important concepts because many theologians and perhaps enthusiastic people engaged in science and religion usually make a lot of fuss about knowing how God works. And I believe that that's overstepping the mark. And then we don't know anything about the universe. That's from Homilies on Genesis, second homily, section 5, where he actually says that we should abstain from this arrogant claim of knowing everything, given that we don't understand the nature of the universe. And in other words, you have these three elements, these unknowns: God's essence, God's way of working in the universe, and the universe itself. Now, by way of conclusions, I believe that Chrysostom should be credited as an apophatic thinker in regard to those three items: God's nature, providential activity, and creation of the universe. And theologians should acknowledge the insufficiency of their tools in order to grapple with these items, and the same should go, I presume, with the sciences. In other words, this takes out of the picture the main reason for fighting between theologians and scientists, because in reality, God's nature, activity, and the outcome of that activity, the universe, are unknown and should be treated apophatically. And this takes out of the equation, if you like, the usual either-or approach, and we are supposed to embrace an interdisciplinary, or at least multidisciplinary approach to reality, from divine to human to cosmic, if you like, the way we see Shatkin talking about Chrysostom's method. But my time is up, and therefore I stop.
Thank you so much, Doru. I will speak my answer in French because you understand it. Merci. Je crois que le fond est clair, et personnellement, j'apprécie votre démarche qui cherche à, en même temps, montrer un aspect de la pensée de Chrysostome, mais envers une problématique qui semble, pour vous, comme vous la présentez, très actuelle et très pertinente pour aujourd'hui, pour les auteurs et théologiens d'aujourd'hui. Maybe we've got some questions or some precision to, if anyone would like to say something. Oui, Manon. Manon qui nous a rejoint depuis.
Si je parle là, c'est bon.
Oui.
Yes, it's a very easy question. Could you please repeat Margaret Shatkin's book's title?
Just a second. Okay, so it's I'll share it again. I know this isn't, so it's an old book. We have this nasty habit of reading only new stuff. So Margaret Amy Shatkin, John Chrysostom as Apologist. It was published in Analecta Vlatadon series number 50 in Thessaloniki, Greece, the Patriarchal Institute for Patristic Studies, 1987. So it's
we do have it.
Eh?
Sorry, I said we do have it in Sources Chrétiennes.
That's wonderful. That's great. And this is really, I haven't seen this book quoted or engaged. Not that I can claim to be knowing everything, but I believe that this is one of those forgotten gems of the older generation, and should be brought back, on the market.
Okay. Maybe a last question for my part. You said it's work for you. It's a work in progress.
Yeah.
Right. But what would you like to do with that? Do you want to read the book? We can read you in some times, or maybe what do you?
Yeah, well, yeah, I intend to write an article, a journal article, to send it to a journal Unfortunately, I assume it'll be something about science and religion, one of those journals that usually late ancient scholars or patristic scholars don't look at. But if anyone is interested, please send me an email, and I'll remember if the article will ever be published to send it to you.
Thank you so much. We will do that.
Two have raised their hand already.
2 questions online. First, Andreas.
Yes, I have 2 questions. So, is there a notion of cosmos in the Platonic sense, possibly in Chrysostom, and possibly even something like cosmos as theos aistetos? And the second question: does this differentiation between essence and providential activity, I guess it's pronoia, does it? So I'm not really familiar with these discourses, but could one see that as in a way already pointing toward the later essence energies distinctions?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll begin with the second one. So it's this is something that 4th century theologians had to develop. The distinctions essence, energy, or nature, activity, essence, activity is older, of course. We have it even in the New Testament present. Justin Martyr used it, and so on and so forth. But 4th century theologians, including the Cappadocians, or beginning with the Cappadocians, but also a little earlier, Athanasius of Alexandria, they all had to use it in order to defend, the identity of Jesus, who Jesus is. If you don't draw the line between essence and energy, you cannot escape Arianism or other forms of subordinationism, and so on and so forth. So, yes, essence and providence, or essence and activity, is another way, unsophisticated way of talking about essence energy. The other thing is, what was the other question?
The notion of cosmos.
Got it. Platonic.
Maybe with a quick answer, because we've got the clock.
Yeah, even if he would have had some Platonic lenience, and I don't think he had, Chrysostom does not speak of it, or at least I could not find it in the 2 writings that I have researched.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. Mathieu, une autre question. Bonjour Mathieu, bienvenue à la Réunion.
Thanks very much. Just a very quick observation, really, not so much a question, but just to say, if Margaret Shatkin says that Chrysostom doesn't get involved in theological controversy, that seems to be immediately belied by the following lines of that passage, and also by your presentation, which shows that Chrysostom was very involved in that particular controversy with the Anomians and others, and was very theological about it by citing scripture, arguing on the basis of those authorities. So there might be different ways of doing theology and different ways of getting involved in debates. Yeah. But I think that's an old prejudice which doesn't bear out from the facts. So thanks very much for having shown this theological interest of Chrysostom, even for today. Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, I think Shatkin has a problem with speculative thinking, which I agree, that wasn't Chrysostom's cup of tea. Obviously he wasn't remote from the time and the problems of the time, but he chose a different path of addressing those things. But there's a difference of tone between the early writings, like on the Incomprehensible of God, and later writings, including the Homilies on Genesis, where you see that kind of polemical bent sort of attenuated. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to you. Thank you for your observation, Matthew. And just before to let the speaker Maria Constantininho, I need your agreement